Hello there again. Now today, Ian and I are going to be sorting out how he might use what I am calling full role. Yesterday in our tutorial we were dealing with how you yourself might become Mr. Evans.
Yes.
But now we're discussing how you as teacher might use another person. Now you see, these are the matters we have to be concerned with today. That you bring in a person who will demonstrate a lifestyle. And they'll demonstrate it by all the signs you build around them, rather like you did with Mr. Evans.
Yes.
But there you could come out of role.
Yes.
Because you could put everything down.
Yes, right.
So they are locked in their own time, the time they dwell. Not dwelt, because when they are active they are dwelling in their time.
Right.
So obviously you can't allow children to mob them because they are totally unprotected. So it's your job now to become a teacher facilitator. You are in charge of the circumstance. You and the role need to decide always when you are leaving it to the role to carry things while you still go on protecting, or when you are not leaving the role to do anything but pay attention to what you're asking of the role. Now this sounds as if you're saying, well, the children haven't got any part in this at all. Well, this is not true. You are going to let the children get as much power as they can.
Yes.
Just the same.
Right.
But the children must be protected from the role, and the role must be protected from the children in terms of the social behaviour. You see, I was working with a role the other day from another culture where it emerged that the roles culture in dealing with real children was you have to say please every time you speak to grown-ups. This made it extremely difficult for the modern children who were moving back in time to an 18th century circumstance, but what was intruding was the genuine culture of the role person, and the power of the children was dissipated instantly. If we have to say please every time, how can we be grown-up people consulting you about your life? And so that kind of thing, it has to be facilitated by you.
Yeah.
Now, the role can appear to be a bit of an act and a bit of a game, and it just amuses and beguiles the class. It passes a nice hour. But I would suggest to you, if you're doing that, get out of the lot and forget these tutorials. You know, say you never met me. They are not like that at all. They are devised to service the relevant learning areas. And unless, if I walk into your classroom and say, why is the role there, you should be able to instantly tell me the interior of that lesson. Straight off, because if you can't do it, you can't devise the role. And so you are defining, because you've seen this is a need of the work now, like Mr. Evans was needed now, because the children needed to have somebody to look at their work. And then you see the role may hold only the power that the framework of the encounter endows them with. The role is not the most important person in this room. The role is an object to create energy in other people, but is personalised, of course. Now, I don't know if there's anything there. I've not explained very well.
I think in earlier tutorials I've come to an understanding about the notion of demonstrating a lifestyle and being in now time, and to some extent that notion of protection, and I understand around that. I'm less sure about these other areas, particularly, you know, the risk that you run in terms of being clear about when the role is needed and what it's there for.
Yes, yes, right.
I feel more uncertain in that.
Yes, I can understand that. We'll try and answer some of that as we go on through the tutorial then. Now, this framework of the encounter will begin to be very, very important. You see, when you introduced your Mr. Evans, the framework of the encounter then was the people in Aiolos were ready now to explain their proposals to you. That is their frame of reference.
Yes.
We need Mr. Evans now because we're ready to explain to him. So whenever you use a role, the frame of reference that the children are in is the important factor. It's not, oh, look at that. It's, now we know why we need that. So their frame of reference, you see. For example, if we dress Derek as a ghost, you know, which is, I've just dreamed that one up, but there might be a time when the ghost of Hamlet's father might be required for interview in order to get to why the play was in the form it took later in the text. We don't have to dress him in too elaborate trappings, but he's locked, he's already dead, he's a ghost. Now, we're not going to meet a ghost. Who are we that need to meet the ghost of Hamlet's father is the framework of the encounter. We may be modern scholars who are trying to see why ghosts are so interesting in plays of this kind. There are all sorts of kinds of attitudes we may have. We may be a group of theatre designers doing an A-level course who are examining how many ways there are to design ghost appearances. That is our frame of reference, you see. So we are only having the ghost of Hamlet's father in order for us to have a point of discussion.
Right. About that frame.
Yes. Now I'd like to make that very clear at the beginning of this, Ian, because that is the bit that stops this being beguiling.
Yes. Yeah, that's what's worrying, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Now here are the rules then. We prepare the role so that it's focused to the learning domains we want. And the role knows the specific experience it's been designed to serve, and there are no gimmicks. Any elaboration by the role into, you know, loving his play is not on. And as a teacher facilitator, you can nip it smart in the bud. Because the role is letting you run the show. You may occasionally let the kids run the show.
Yes.
But there's nobody in this room except you that carries the total can. There are certain conventions you can use. If we build Derek into a role and I want him to realise you're on your own, I'm trusting you exactly, you can do exactly what you think is right and I will rescue it, then I'll turn my back and leave him to it. I might just walk away. And that convention tells him I'm trusting him and he can trust me. If he gets in a mess, I'll be there right now. Or if he gets the kids in a mess, I'll be there even quicker. Right.
Yes.
So the second thing is we protect the role person and the class. The third thing is we must frame the encounter so that the children have a point of view when they enter it.
Yes.
They have a purpose for meeting. It is not you've dreamed up this lovely notion to pass a nice hour.
Right. So, like with Mr. Evans, there was
That's
a purpose.
right. Very specific. And tomorrow he'll have a different specification if they need him. He'll never return to the original need. It'll be deeper next time. It may be still to look at their work, but there'll be a lot more challenge in it. And then there has to be this designed, how will we activate the role and put the role to rest when we don't want it? Because there are frequently times when the last thing we need is the role, so it must be laid in some way to stillness, out of centre,
Yes.
off, but not off stage, because it ain't a stage, it's a social event. You see what I mean? Right, so let's have a look first at some full roles, as I'm going to call them. Now have a look at this one. Now this one, it looks a bit strange. It's a lady in a long gown playing an oboe. And this person is representing a peacock in a garden for some severely subnormal children in a hospital. This role is demonstrating by sound and full colour of the gown so that all see, however poor their eyesight, she leaves the summer garden. That's a full roll. She doesn't speak because peacocks don't speak. Her voice is the oboe, and you can hear the harsh tone of it. Now let's have another full roll. Let's have a look at this one. Now you see, here we are dealing with students who are examining some literature. They are looking at the letters of this lady, Mary Ward. Now you see, she's using the school table. That looks like the principal's chair, I don't know if it is, but she's dressed in her correct period, and her symbolic trappings are a pen, an inkhorn, and a candle.
Mm.
She is locked in her time. She will have eventually on her table all her letters. The frame of reference for the students here is, we are examining the nature of your mind through your letters. We're trying to understand how you in your time saw the world, because we are studying your book, or this book, of your letters. Now, it's not very elaborate. It's just a bit of red silk and a white paper ruff and a glove and a feather.
Yes, yes. No, it's not.
And she'll need protection, because at some stage children will probably crowd round there, and she's got territorial rights. It won't be any use to anybody if 30 students, actually there wouldn't be in this A-level class as many as that, are all over the top so that she is personally invaded. Now that's an example of protection. In the case of the peacock you saw, the peacock is protected because it moves through, and those children cannot move easily. So that peacock, to a certain extent, you see, can protect itself. So there is, I'm trying to give you examples of a large variety. What you must never do is think, oh, these children are only 9 years old, they couldn't handle Mary Ward. Well, of course they could, if they're in a framework that requires the kinds of life and understanding about life that this woman of letters had. There is no role you can't use, because you temper it to the shorn lamb. And the shorn lamb is in the position to require that role. So if you can, get out of your mind notions like, well, Mr. Evans is all right for juniors, but he wouldn't be any good for seniors. Of course all roles work for all people, according to, you know, the level that you want to use it. Now let's have a look at this last one. Now this role is only dressed as far as the tabletop. If you look underneath, you see his Australian boots, desert boots as well. But above the table, he is Dr. Lister. And in front of him, because we need all his instruments, he has to be a portrait. Because I cannot allow those children to handle those very contaminated, surgical, sharp, terrifying instruments. So I am forced to make Dr. Lister a portrait. You can't walk in and pick up that. I made a promise that nobody would touch those jars of dried blood. But by looking at the portrait, you see, what you give children is permission to stare. But you protect them always from feeling stared at, because they have not given any permission to stare in the beginning. When you are in role, you've given them permission to stare. When Mr. Evans talks about their work, he stares at their work.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
So here we have Dr. Lister. Now you see, he exists because these children, in their final term of junior school, are being offered the opportunity to think like people who do scientific experiments. So Dr. Lister has been selected to serve that purpose, that he has to do microbiology. He won't be calling it that in his time, but they are looking at how does a person make and test experiments, because when they go up to the senior school, they'll need a vocabulary. They'll need the ability to take notes, to observe. This is why it's in their last term. Later, next week, they will work with Louis Pasteur, because Louis Pasteur can do things with Petra dishes and so on.
Yes. Yes.
And so is deliberately designed for a future job when they do science in the high school. One would say it's a bit late. You know, top juniors is a bit late. But at least this head teacher coming into that school knew it hadn't been done and decided to try and do something about it. So there was a read where you'd have to have a full role for that. You can't pretend you're Lister. A person can demonstrate to people who are going to be doctors how it is when you are a doctor and help you to try to think like a doctor at this point. Now I'm just going to show you three more, because I want, again, always to explain how differently you create them, because they have different purposes. Now this one is Ceres, the goddess of the earth, who looks after all growing things. She's very vividly dressed. You'll recognise she looks like the peacock for children who see rather ill. She has apples, and she has a second role, the tree she serves.
Right.
These are for severely handicapped people. To understand a concept of the seasons, and also at a very mature level, the bondings between people and the world, their world, and the bondings between people and their families. So Ceres has Persephone, a daughter, who is dressed identical and has a smaller dish of apples. I haven't done two here for you. Derek did you the drawings. So she works with the deliberation of one who looks after things and takes the harvest. People may help her. They will not question her motives in life. They are severely handicapped people. But they will help her. They will serve the tree. The tree will thank them for what they give. And she is bonded with the tree. You can't talk about that to people who need that level. But Ceres loses a daughter to Pluto. And Pluto is the least threatening that he can be made of one who is a capturer. The prison, as you can see, is only lace. It hangs down, and he never does an aggressive act. But he needs a child, and she has to lose a daughter. And when she loses a daughter, the tree loses a nurturer. It is a demonstration of bonding for people who cannot discuss it academically. It is as clean for that purpose as you will be as Mr. Owen. I feel like I'm ramming this into your head with nails and a hammer.
Yes.
And so these three, that's very elaborated, because you cannot say, I have a daughter. What you can do is call Persephone, and when we are together we are dressed exactly the same, but she is smaller. And that says it. And I give Persephone apples, and Persephone gives us apples. And so it is slowly built, so that a concept. The end of that work, when Persephone was bonded in that jail, and Pluto is saying, wanting you, Every day I am wanting you. And she's singing, I haven't got a little girl. That's when a boy who is severely subnormal said to me, everybody should have a father and a mother. Because he had had time.
Yes.
And it was he who said, Persephone, take the stone apple from him and the real apple from your mum. And that is exactly what that myth is about. The winter and the summer. And that's what this is about.
Mm.
And here you see we have a fabulous role. We have a unicorn. The children are looking into Alan Garner's book, Elidor. That unicorn is only a woman in a white sort of boiler suit and a bit of white ribbon and an awkward sort of horn, because a unicorn horn is very difficult. By meeting the unicorn, they can reach some understanding that they cannot get through just reading. At this stage, they are 9 years old. They can see how vulnerable the unicorn is and how the unicorn needs their help. So they can step in and out of the book. Mm. And the unicorn can help them perceive the book, because the unicorn can say, if you read the teller of the tale, you can see if I tell truth. So they read the book, you see. Now, of course, we're going to use Derek to be a role in here, out of your circumstances. And for this, I have suggested, because I wanted to show you something a little bit far out, and this is why I've shown you these.
Yes, yes.
Later we'll look at some very ordinary looking roles. I chose the business of mythology. It would seem to me terribly important, always, because it's the way I am, that there is always many levels of truth, and that the truth of what people used to think was true is as important as the truth of what people now think is truth. So, for example, if you look at these two kinds of truth, the vocabulary of winds that are poetic truths. A gale, it sounds like it. A hurricane, a tornado, a cyclone, a typhoon. A zephyr, a breeze. But then you look at the Beaufort scale. It's numbers 1 to 12. Actually, I think it's numbers 1 to 16 somewhere, but I've forgotten. We'll get that right. They need both, because we are educating people, not just drilling them. And being able to hear these two kinds of knowledge, to use these two kinds of knowledge, is again, you see, back to this. The words people feel mean things, and the conventions people make so that they can be interpreted all over the world. It is the need of the scientific communication and the poetic communication. So I said to Derek, find me some gods who are associated with winds. I mean, why not use the guy? He knows about things like this. And so he waded through loads and loads of gods. Actually, they're all in one book, you know. He can actually find books where things are. And the thing he came up with was this sort of drawing first. And he chose Aiolos. Now, Aiolos is interesting because, you see, he stores the winds. He's the wind god guardian. He's not the wind. So he guards the north wind, Boreas, Zephyros, the southwest, Euros, the east, and Notos, the north, the south wind. And he's got these winds in a bag. And he's got them all hidden in a cave, you see. Now, because we want it to have a lot of background information in case we need it, because you can't use shabby stuff. Derek took the trouble to look up for me how he was related to other gods. Now, I'm not going to drill the kids with that, but I would need to know that. later on. It's handy for me. Now, if I was using a sixth former, I would have had to do a bit myself, because he wouldn't have had the background that Derek happens to have. Now, there's loads of gods that the children who are going to make this pavilion, I want them to research into.
Right. Yeah.
So, all we've done, you see, is photocopy some bits from the Larousse Encyclopedia. We haven't gone far, you know. We've not spent 6 months on it, and we've photocopied it, but we've signed it, so that it might be a bit important. This will be one of the trappings, because this will foreshadow research. And later we might meet him and say, did you know there's a lot more like you? You think you're the most important one, but I'll tell you, there's lots of other gods that do what you think you only do, because that gives them the chance to use their knowledge on him later on, you see. I hope this is a bit clear. It's all a bit more elaborate than a set of car keys, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Now then, let's dress him. Now, I've taken the trouble, because I want you to get into this. We're going to dress him, but we're going to dress him bearing in mind what is a myth. Now, this is your preparation. Later, the children will come to understand this. This is Campbell's definition of a myth. It is come into comparison as a meaning, a story which has come down from the past, which ostensibly relates a historical event or events, but whose origin has been forgotten. We don't know if there was ever an Aiolos. We don't know why Aiolos was invented, and isn't clearly traceable, but it's always an attempt to explain something, some practice, some belief, some natural phenomena, some institution, or even some extraordinary event. Now, myth is commonly applied to stories which tell about gods or divinity, or heroes with divine attributes. It's not in Astasi, or whoever's in football at the moment, I'm not up with it. It's divine attributes. Sometimes, of course, we try to put some of our big modern heroes, you know, we try to make them into gods, and they often suffer in their real lives, don't they? But these gods or divine heroes imparted the arts of life to man. Frequently they've been bringers of gifts, sometimes double-edged. And in this sense, myth has a connection with practicality and religion. You see, we can do this because we can sail the world on the winds you provide us with, is an example of practicality and belief, that you must placate the god of the winds, for example, would be an example of that. Now, I need to get that clear, because I need to help my role recognise this is the energy of that role. He must never and can never give a scientific explanation to anything. He can only give a mythological explanation, which he firmly believes in. After all, why am I standing around here? What have I been doing all these years? Looking after these flaming winds, sort of thing. But he must never be tricked into the vocabulary of the Beaufort scale. You know, number 12 today. No way. So I need to know this.
Yes.
I'm never going to dictate it to the children. They will learn it from meeting the myth. So we're going to dress him. And then we're going to learn to protect him. You are going to learn to protect him. It's your
I thought
problem.
it was going to be something like that.
Yes, I thought you might, yeah. So now, you've got some clothing with you. We'll move this table back a little bit, and if you bring your things through, Derek, we'll get you ready, and then we'll decide how we would frame the children and how many kinds of framings we can have. So I'll stand back, and you can explain what's made you choose these. I mean, I presume they're what you had for a start.
Yes.
Yes, yes. I'll just sit back.
I chose the black heavy one because it is so black, it is so heavy, so that I, as Derek Stevens, could be well hidden, so I'm well protecting.
Yes, right.
And because it is so voluminous, it wasn't made for me.
Yes.
So it's for someone originally who was much bigger.
Yes.
But it needed, I felt, the dark heaviness behind as the foundation of
Now, you see,
everything.
Derek's done your homework for you for this tutorial, but this is the homework you would have done in the main, wouldn't you? Because frequently you'll borrow a body that may only be asked, would you be the god of the winds for me? And they might go, what? But you can protect them even as you dress them and say, look, all I need of you is to stand and wear these.
This is probably where I need help.
Yes, well, Ian will help you. Yes, is this because of the trailing element?
The trailing and the idea of that it was lighter, of clouds, of stormy, wintry sunsets, of the storms which can arise out of the night.
Yes. Now, of course, Ian, you won't have access necessarily to these particular things. But it is amazing what you can... I mean, I might go home and just look at the bed sheets and see if I've got any a dark counterpane or... it's amazing. You start... Well, I'm afraid you start noticing everything and you rob people almost, you see.
Yes.
Right, stand him up there and then we can see what else you... We're always making do. We're not going out spending money. We haven't got it. We're making do. I expect you've used those for other things in school. Yeah.
Yes, this is well into its 20s by now. What I was intrigued with the reading that I did was the idea of, it appeared in several things, about the god clad in steel.
Oh, yes.
And one of them, I really can't remember which, who could only handle the wind and the thunder if he was wearing steel gloves.
Yes, how very interesting.
That he needed to... The power he was wielding was so powerful that it could actually damage him.
Oh, yes.
Now, one of those neat accidents, I could only find one glove.
You know, that's like Chernobyl, isn't it, in a sense?
Yes.
That all dangerous elements... Or, you know, there must be a magical element almost in protection.
And I mean, if you recall when I did Gilgamesh, and I had all the gods wearing gloves, and I thought I still had the great stock of these.
Yes, and you've
But
only
it was
got
reduced to
one
one, which is neatly battered.
Yes, yes, with all
And I
this
felt that was important
lightning
again,
and
that
heat,
there was danger within what I'm handling.
Yes, it's excellent.
And there only being one, and the ambivalence.
Yes,
So
you've
this
almost got breeze and typhoon.
Yes, this is the rigid, implacable side.
Yes,
and this is, I hope, is the unprotected, is the more gentle side.
Yes, the nurturing. Yes, yes.
And then last of all, the face, which I felt had to be, of all the masks that I have in store, the most ambiguous because it has no expression.
Yes.
So that it can become.
Yes.
What I was after as I was refining the thinking was wind, the power for good, the power for what we perceive as bad.
But the inhuman.
The inhuman, is right. So that it's just nothing
Just
in
place
itself.
It before you. So you can't place it on you, before you. Now, just hold that position a minute. I wouldn't have access to what Derek has because he happens to be in that sort of trade in his school. I would say to myself, what can I do? Something, I would conceive my own God, of course. Yeah. And I would tend to say, I can't do pictures like that, I can't do faces. I would give him a plain grey paper oval with 2 eye marks, and they would have to be squared off like that because you know he's implacable and he cannot think like a human. You can't endow him with human qualities because he's a god.
Yes.
And so I would do it with grey paper simply mounted on. One of my best tools, all my teaching life, has been, I think, what Derek has used there. You can take it off a minute, Derek. The stick you're using is the sort I buy to support my house plants.
Right.
I have 100 of those that I've used in all sorts of ways. Now, the beauty of the mask is, you see, the god can be laid aside by simply removing the face, in this case.
Yes.
And be activated by the face entering the situation, you see.
Yes.
Now let's put him at rest for the moment. If we seat him down there. Now we have to consider, you see, what frame of mind shall the children be in? Why do we need him? Because this is not bringing in a theatre and education team who have prepared something in advance. So what I've tried to do for you is prepare a sort of hierarchy of uses for him. And if we put these here, we can all have a look. I'll bring my chair, then I'm not blocking off. I said to you earlier that all roles can serve all children.
Yes.
And I've always said all literature can serve all children. It's a matter of how it is tempered to do the service and how you manufacture it in a form they can take. So Derek has, in your project, I mean, you don't have to do it this way. I don't want you to think I'm making you do it this way. Derek has, in your project, many levels of use. So at least they can meet him 4 times. I mean, I've just worked out 4.
Yeah.
If you want to start helping them realise that when you read these old tales, they actually are very living, truthful, feeling things. That they have a dynamism and a power. They're not just old stuff. And of course there are many modern, I would imagine, though I haven't seen many lately, but things like The Return of the Jedi that I keep seeing in books that I don't buy because I don't like the covers and so on. But that is, there must be all sorts of modern mythologies, you see. Well, we know that are being built up, that are turning into myths, even in our own time.
Yes.
I think I was a myth once because I heard a student came from the Caribbean and I played a kind of game. I said to them on the first morning, Mrs. Heathcote can't be here this morning, but she's asked me if you wouldn't mind just jotting down what you've heard about her. And this man wrote, he'd heard, I was so heavy, I was carried in a litter. What a myth! But you do, there are so many modern things that are happening that are turning into myths even in our own time. So in the beginning, you see, the first level, the children may just need facts about what did people think the wind was in those olden times. So we would use Derek from the framework of people who only want to know what you thought you did. We don't want all these long explanations of who you are, but what did you think you did? Later we may want to go back and say, well, where did he come from? How did he get to be the god of the winds? But we're still wanting facts. Now, of course, you could do it the alternative method, and you could say, right, I've brought in some books of stories, I'm going to tell you some stories of Aiolos and Poseidon and so on. Perfectly reasonable way to do it. This is different, though, in that it matters now terribly for the garden festival. Those parents who bring children must somehow be introduced to this idea that men thought gods made these zephyrs and winds and so on. Now, of course, if you as a teacher don't think that matters, that you'd be a fool to start it.
Yes.
That's at one level then. We can use this role to get information and never forget it. You don't forget it when a god spoke to you. I still meet little children, children who are now grown up, who say, how's Bede getting on? Because they met Bede when they were 11. and they're riding motorbikes now. And I say, do you mean Bede who actually lived at Jarrow, or do you mean Bede that teaches down in Halifax? And the boy said, both. Same guy, though.
Yeah.
Now, the second level, you see, is the God now is they're demanding to know, how did you affect humans? Not what did you do, what are the facts about what you looked after, but how do you think you affected humans? What had you to do with us? Did you ever realise what you did to people? Did you ever think what it's like to be human, you see? Now, here, I'm asking them to learn much more about the kinds of winds so they can manufacture a tape. I see that as a possibility. They're going to get mythic vocabulary. They're going to create the sounds that he's saying in words, that they will generate in sound, so that if we go into this wind pavilion in the garden festival, we can find ourselves in a storm. And I don't see why your 10-year-olds shouldn't create a fabulous series of tapes that's translating from the godness of the sounds that he said in words to the godness of the sounds they are creating through music, hammers, whatever they can lay their hands on, and the making of wind chimes, if that is part of this. So always there is a purpose. You remember, I know, I know, I can use what I know. So that would, to me, be the second level. They may be painting constructs, they may be creating word pictures. I am the God. Once they've met one, they are capable of creating. What does the God of the south wind say? What does the God of the north wind say to Aiolos when he shuts them in the cave? Now, do you find that I am going too far off practicality when I say, here is this God who is only a person standing in for him, and the children will eventually create something for a garden festival in Cardiff? I mean, is it overwhelming you, or does it seem absolutely straightforward logical?
Certainly not that. It's quite overwhelming, but it's exciting. I mean, you know, it's that sort of... I can't... it would be a real challenge. Has exciting possibilities, and I can't yet see perhaps how.
And it isn't yet yours. I've made it, so you can't make it yours. You can do it
but
your
I'd love
own
to
way.
have a go.
Yes. The question I always say is it reasonable? Does it seem reasonable that a class of 9-year-olds in my little classroom here, your little classroom there, can meet a wind god in one lesson, take from him the need to create wind sound, to write how they did it so they don't forget and they can do it again, to then go out and make the very sound onto a machine, talk it out, hassle it through, time it, plan it, play it back, test it. Does this seem educational or not? And then say to Mr. Owen Evans, we've got to fit this into the pavilion, and we know we've timed it, it takes an hour and a quarter, and we want a space in the pavilion to create a moving shadow of clouds. We know how we think we can do it. We've had a look at how we can do shapes and gelatines and a light. And we've tried it on a little box. And we'll show you how it looks in this little diorama. But when the people come in, it needs to be at the far end. So it's almost the last thing they see and hear before they go out. And when they go out, they can pick up. We want to have something written. We've got some legends we've copied out, We've actually done an illuminated manuscript, if that's the sort of thing. We've tried some calligraphy. Now, the question you ask yourself is, when you read the curriculum, how many curriculum skills is this about? Is it about discussion? Is it about translation from this word to this word? What is it about? And is it reasonable? Now, the panic word is, I won't have time.
Yes.
I don't understand this. Well, I can appreciate it, but I don't understand it. Because you are cramming into one rather large notion, the curriculum. It's being done. It doesn't have to be done linearly like that. It's not a trap. I think it's a freedom, but it's just how you feel about it.
Yes.
Now, the third level, you see, takes them into higher order thinking again. Because that's practicality. They can test it out, they can make noises till they get them how they want them. That's hands-on stuff. But this now demands research. That research is hands-on. What sort of a noise does it make if you hit those pipes with a hammer? Let's all try only the boys' voices. You know, that's getting instant feedback. This isn't. This is, how do you plan so that the children could find their way round a lot of mythological stories, a lot of myths, and begin to see patterns and parallels. This is only that, told in a different way. Cinderella belongs in every language. Even the Eskimos have it. So we look at the origins of myth. Can we use him to discover something about why myths have to exist? Now, he can't talk like a teacher. He can only say, but I'm Aiolos. I know I exist. Good heavens, you know. I exist because I have to do this. He doesn't come out of his time.
Yes.
They may turn around and say, Aiolos, you are in for a shock, mate. Because actually we know, and pin your ears back, we are going to demonstrate to you that there's another way to look at you. Now you look at this drawing of the earth. We know, because we're a lot long, we've lived after you. We've sailed so fast and flown so fast, we can see how the winds work. You may think you know, poked in your little cave on whatever island, but you don't know the half of it. They can explain to Aiolos the origin of myths, and they can explain, we've come a long way since you made. And Aiolos can answer, are you telling me that I have wasted my life for all those people who believed in me? And there isn't a right easy answer to that one.
No.
They might turn around and say, yes, we are, in which case you've gone a bit too fast. And it hasn't yet been able to be used by the children. They haven't been able to accept the two truths. Because in one lifetime, I mean, modern children today can look at what their grandmothers would have used as poultices and seen, yeah, it did work. You know, a bread poultice did actually make a boil come out and develop. We don't need them today, or we don't use them today, because now somebody can give us something else. But one is doing the same as the other, but possibly more effectively. But bread poultices served, so did Aiolos. Men had to know who they were talking about when they discussed the south wind. And if they could explain it's Aiolos, throw him 2 fish bags, we might manage. It's a lifesaver. Does that help you to see? So here we want to look at, you know, analysis and comparisons of wind gods.
Yes.
Looking at many myths, a lot of bookwork there,
Right.
and a lot of transforming it into graphs. This god occurs through these 5. He has this name, however, in these, but this is the same as that, doing the same thing. Marvellous graphs there, if you are prepared to to develop it. And then we come, of course, to, I think, the fourth level, which is how can you persuade a man who will be destroyed, a god who will be destroyed if you're not careful, that we do actually not need you in the same way as we used to. That is the highest sensitive meeting. You can't do that without a role. You've got to have a role that can immediately give feedback, just as the sounds did.
Yes.
But he is dying of it if they won't let him live. The gods have died if people won't let them live. They don't have to believe them in the same way as earlier, but they can acknowledge that they exist within the two sides of the mind, the truth of the myth, the truth of the proven. Now you see, he can be the person they explain their puzzles and charts to. They can invent, if you choose to set it up so they may, that they can use what he tells them to create games about mythology, to create, using his names guarding the winds, for a board game about how the winds circle the earth. That's just me dreaming up, you see. Now we come to the next stage, and I'll just introduce it to you and then give you a pause. When you look at these four levels, you know the children are going to be in a different frame of mind. So we're going to look next at the frames of mind they'll need to be in when they approach it, the kinds of tools they'll need when they approach him, and also the different ways they may have to find him. You see, if you just stand up again, Derek, to find him with his mask on, standing up, suggests that they will meet the god. I mean, he can say, I am here, I serve your will. Now, the promise there, if you look at it, is, oh, you know, that guy can speak. We don't know yet what sort of voice, but we can feel that we're going to meet somebody who is going to address us. So the social encounter only needs time to be bridged. But we may want to meet him in other circumstances which enable us to find out differently, which means we'll use different language. Now we'll leave it there, we'll let him take off his trappings for a minute or two if you want, then we'll come back to these different modes of using the god Aiolos. Okay?
Yeah.
Well, I did warn you I was going to produce a rather fabulous affair.
Yes.
But later, you see, you might want, the same person might lend their body and you might just be a man from the weather centre. It's only Aiolos, you know. Yeah, just different instruments. The man from the weather centre must have the equivalent of gloves that read the power. Right, good. Oh, isn't it exciting?